Hello and welcome to another video. This is Gina from McGuire and I'm glad you're here. Today I thought I'd show you yet another fun way to use your embossing folders creatively. Embossing folders are becoming more and more popular and they're an excellent way to create texture on backgrounds of your cards. Well, today I'm showing how you can combine ink blending along with an embossing folder to really make that texture pop and stand out even more. Now I'm going to start with the simplest example first, and then we'll step it up to this one, which is definitely my favorite. And at the end, I'll show you one where I create a white rose also. Okay, so for my first two cards, I'm using the new Altenew Craft Your Life Elegant Motifs kit. Now this is a kit that includes a 6x8 stamp set, coordinating stencils, coordinating dies, and an embossing folder. This is a beautiful set that has outline images, but you can easily color them using the stencils. Altenew has offered these Craft Your Life kits for a few months now, and they are really popular because there's so much in them that coordinates so well. The price is also good, and if you want to, you could also subscribe and save additional. Now these stencils are meant to line up with the stamped images so you can quickly color them in. There's even layering with the stencils, making it super fast and easy. Now the stencils aren't really meant to line up with the embossing folder. The embossing folder is just supposed to fit the theme, but I found I was able to use them, and I'll show you that with the second card. The kit also comes with a guide like this that has design suggestions, ink color suggestions, and everything you know to easily figure out the layering involved with the stamp set and stencils. Let's get started with my easiest example first. I feel this background really demonstrates how using an embossing folder with ink really makes the background pop a lot. It makes that texture show even more. I'm starting by stamping one of the floral images from the kit's 6x8 stamp set with black ink onto white cardstock. Any black ink and any white cardstock would work. Now you could color this with watercolor, Copic markers, colored pencils, anything you want. But me, I prefer to use the coordinating stencils that come with it. The guide tells you which to use, but I found it was easy to figure out on my own. The first opening allows me to apply a light amount of color to these three flowers all at once. Now you could use any inks and inking tool you prefer. I'm using Altenew Baby Pink ink here, along with an Altenew blending brush. I'm just applying a light amount of ink to this area, so that gives a base color for the flower. Then I move the stencil to the next layer, which allows me to apply darker color to some of the petals. Now this is the fuchsia ink, and I'll also use a little magenta. After applying that medium fuchsia color over the whole opening, I'm just using a smaller blending brush from Altenew with the darker color just to apply some darker color towards the center. So easy to do, and look how beautiful those results are. Now I just rotate that stencil and I find to line up the leaves. Very easy to do. This stencil will allow me to color in the three leaves all at once. And here I'm using the Sweet Leaf color from Altenew and a blending brush. Now I did also come in with the Shadow Creek, which is a little bit darker, and a smaller brush, and just added a little bit of the darker color to part of the leaves. Look at that, so fast to color. Now the stamp set does offer a few layering images for the leaves themselves to give them some detail. So I'll go ahead and do that and stamp those with that same darker green ink. Sorry my head gets in the way, but it's the easiest way to line up my stamps. So now check this out. This only took me a few minutes to color, such a time saver. But if you do enjoy the coloring process and taking the time to do it, you could also color this with markers, watercolor, whatever you want. Okay, now I can use the coordinating die that's included in the kit to cut this out. I did use my R89 Copic marker just to add some dark color to the center of each of the flowers. You could skip this if you want. I didn't take much care to blend or anything, just added the color. Next, I used the Altenew Waffled Diamonds embossing folder on white cardstock. Look at that beautiful texture. It's subtle, but in real life you can see it, and it's just a nice addition to any background. I thought I'd step up the white cardstock by adding a gradient of ink on the background. I'm using a larger Altenew blending brush and the same baby pink ink and the other pink inks that I used earlier. I'm applying it just towards that bottom corner of our embossed background, and then just allowing the color to fade as it goes to the opposite corner. So a heavier amount of ink on the bottom right corner and then just fading out. Start in the corner with your ink and then work your way up, and that'll allow you to quickly create a soft blend into the white. Now you can't really see the texture there. When I hold it up and tilt it, you'll see the texture more. Look how beautiful that is. But I'm going to step it up and make it stand out even more. First, I like to heat set this and make sure the ink is dry. I think it gives better results if you do so. And by the way, you could use any dye ink for that step there. Now I'm coming in with a sanding block and sanding over the raised areas and just going in circles in both directions, making sure I'm moving around a lot. And I'm sanding off the color that we just applied from the raised areas so the white cardstock shows. This allows the pattern to stand out more, creating kind of highlights on the raised area. You could use sandpaper for this with the sand block. These paper sanding blocks that I use that are meant for crafting are the handiest tools and very inexpensive, but you could definitely use sandpaper if that's what you have. After wiping it clean, I did trim the background down a bit and matted it with black cardstock just to make it pop. I added my flowers and a white heat embossed sentiment on black cardstock, and that is the Altenew Sentiments 2 stamp set. I added that all to a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card. Now when you look close, see how the pattern in the background stands out more? Because we sanded the color off of the raised area of the pattern. It looks so beautiful this way, and it didn't take much time at all. I did also add a few pearls here and there, but otherwise it's a pretty simple card design that allows that background to shine. Okay, let's step up this technique a bit and use an embossing folder that has beautiful floral images, and we'll use multiple inks on it. Now this is the embossing folder that comes with the kit that I showed you earlier, and it's a great size for slimline or mini slimline cards. I'll be using a mini slimline size today. I'm putting a piece of white cardstock into my embossing folder. Now with my Spellbinders Platinum 6, I find the best way to use the Altenew embossing folders is to just put it right on the platform and then put one cutting plate on top. If you think you need a shim, you could add a cardstock shim. Look at that beautiful texture. It's beautiful as is, but we're going to add color to it. Now these are the peach colors I'm using first. These are all Altenew inks. You could use absolutely any dye inks you have. This is my favorite color combo from Altenew. Now I'm applying this over one of the flowers using the stencil. Now the stencils in this kit were meant to line up with the stamp set, but I was able to make them work with this embossed background too. So I'm just lining up that large flower up there, and I'm applying a light amount of ink. You can see there how it's lined up nicely. I have my frosty pink ink, which is the lightest, and I'm applying that with an Altenew blending brush. Now this will be very light because I'm doing light-handed and using a light colored ink. You could definitely make this more vibrant if you want to, and I'll actually come back and add some more a bit later. Now I'm moving on to the next layer of that same flower, lining it up over our embossed flower of the same shape, and I'm applying a bit darker ink. This is the pink pearl color. Again, I'm using a blending brush. You could use a sponge or Tim Holtz ink blending tool if you want to, and that would keep the ink more on the raised areas, but I really wanted to apply it over the whole raised surface. Okay, so after applying that, I did come in with a bit of the coral berry, my favorite color, and added that towards the center of these openings. I decided that wasn't enough, so I came in with the heartbeat, which is the darkest of the colors I chose, and added a bit of that too. Now when I take this off, you'll see it looks like I spent a lot of time coloring that, but it was definitely quick because of the stencils. And then I thought that first open area needed to be a little bit darker, so I added a bit more color. And look how beautiful that is. The beautiful coloring over the texture. Now it's time to move on to another flower. This time I used the same pinks that I used on my first card. These I reach for a lot, the baby pink, fuchsia, and magenta. Now if you don't have an embossing folder with stencils that coordinate, I will have another technique for you in my third card that you can try out that works with any embossing folder like our first one. But I thought this was really special, and I thought it would be great to demonstrate how much this technique of sanding off the color makes these backgrounds pop. Now, if you wanted to do selective coloring with an ink blending tool over like a floral embossing foldered background, and you don't have stencils like I do, you could also create masks to do that. It's definitely worth it when you see the results. So there you can see that beautiful texture with the pink ink. Now for the middle flower, I use these colors of yellow and orange. Now I'm going to skip through that because it's the same process, just lining it up and coloring it. Then I moved the stencil on to the leaves, and I noticed that these leaves lined up. I'm again using a green ink. This is the Firefly ink, and then I will add some sweet leaf on top of it. So I was able to make the stencils line up with the embossing folder. They also line up with the stamps. You could also use the stencils alone. I really like when there are bundles like this available that allow you to really stretch the supplies. Now, I know bundles aren't for everyone. You could definitely do this with individual products or try using what you have. I just like to show how you can really stretch the supplies from one kit. So I kept moving the stencils around, finding out how they would line up with the texture from the embossing folder. I'm going to skip the rest of the leaves, and here is the end result. I found that there weren't little stencils to line up with that area up there on the top right. Everything else was covered, but that's okay because I plan to put my sentiment there, so it really doesn't matter. So I was excited to get even more from this kit than I expected. And here's a closer look. Look at that color on that texture. I tell you, I just think it's absolutely beautiful. And you want to heat set this before you move on to the sanding process. I just feel it keeps the paper from tearing. So I have my sanding block here, and I'm just going around in circles over the entire surface. Now this will remove the ink from the raised areas, giving some white highlights to the edges, which really makes these flowers just stand out even more. Now I have done a video on this technique before, and I will link to it up here on the top right. In that video, I demonstrate doing this inking and sanding technique with a lot of different types of embossing folders. Good variety. Some of them are floral, some of them are geometric. I encourage you to watch that if you've never seen it. I just wanted to revisit the idea today with these detailed inked floral flowers and the other options I showed you. This is definitely one of the most effective and easy ways to stretch your embossing folders. So again, I'll have that linked up in the top right. I trimmed the background down to fit on the front of a mini slimline card, and now I'm adding a sentiment. I loved this layered Be Kind die set from Altenew, but I only wanted the word kind. So I just did the die cutting and cut off the word be from all of the die cuts. So I die cut 2 of the shadow die from white cardstock and glued that together. I will then add the word kind on top with black cardstock. Now, since we cut the B off, I need to add something else with the word kind. So I'm again using the Altenew Sentiment 2 stamp set. I white heat embossed "You Are So Loved" on a black cardstock strip, and I cut off the word loved. So now it says "You Are So," and I can team that up with kind. Changing up your word sentiments and your stamp sentiments and combining them really allows you to expand how much you use your products. Originally, I thought I would make this a vertical card with the sentiment at the top. But after I assembled my card, I decided to make it a horizontal card. Sometimes it's fun to change things up as you go. So I have a mini slimline card that is about 3.5 by 6.25 inches. I glued my embossed piece down the center, and then I cut very thin strips of gold cardstock, and I'm gluing that right along the edge of our embossed piece. This will make it look like I matted the piece with the gold cardstock, but really I'm just using thin scraps. I then decided at this point to try the kind over that little area where I don't have any ink. But if any of it was peeking through, I wanted to have some color there. So I just grabbed a marker that was close to the ink color that I used on my leaves, and I colored over the raised areas. After doing that, I glued the kind right on top of it and the "You Are So" above that. Now I did add a few gold baubles from Trinity stamps here and there in the background, but other than that, this card is done. I really thought it was fun to use the ink and that sanding off texture to make the background really stand out. Now, if you are looking for a kit that has an embossing folder with stencils that match up perfectly, I will link to another video I did with another Altenew kit, and it will be linked up here in the top right. You can check that out. That stencil and embossing folder would work great with this technique. Okay, let's move on to another example. On this one, I also show how to create a white rose from dyes. Now, this background was very fast to create, and I really liked the technique with it. The embossing folder I used is from another Altenew Craft Your Life kit. This is the garden rose that came out in the past, but it's still available. I'll be using the embossing folder today, but keep in mind that the kit comes with this little guide, a stamp set that's beautiful layered roses, coordinating dies, and a coordinating stencil. But again, today I'm just using the embossing folder. I thought the background of roses was just beautiful. I have white cardstock that I'm putting in the embossing folder and running this through my die cut machine. I do recommend using a heavier weight white cardstock for this technique because you'll be sanding away some of it, and if you use a really thin cardstock, you might sand holes into your raised areas. Now this is Neenah Classic Crest Solar White in 110 pound. You could use an 80 pound, it would be fine. Just make sure it's a good quality white heavyweight cardstock. Next, I am using my Waffle Flower stencil mat, which is my favorite surface for stenciling on. And I have some colors of Altenew ink. This is the Volcano Lake and an Altenew large blending brush. I am just randomly applying these colors to the raised areas. Now I'm coming in with some Sweet Leaf, and then I will also add some Eastern Sky. So I'm using some teal, green, and blue to cover this background. It's really important to make sure your inks overlap. That's what allows you to get an easy blending over a background. It's very forgiving doing ink blending over an embossing folder background like this because the texture's there and you don't really have to blend as well. But it's easy to do with the large brush and just making sure that you overlap your colors. You could do a rainbow here, you could do anything you wanted. I'm just really into blues, teals, and greens right now. Once I'm done, I will heat set this to make sure that all of the ink is dry, and then we can go ahead and sand the raised areas. Now that makes a big difference on this one. So when we start sanding, we're removing the inked cardstock from the most raised areas of this background. This will give nice white highlights that really define these roses in the background. Now, if you really want to make it bold, you can take an ink pad and lightly rub ink over the raised areas too, and all those white areas will grab that ink. I demonstrate that in the other video if you want to check it out. But for these examples today, I really wanted to keep those most raised areas white so it looked like little highlights. So now I have this beautiful background. I want to keep the rest of the cards simple. I thought I would create a white layered rose to put on top. People have asked in the past what colors of cardstock to use to create a white layered rose. I found using white cardstock, Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock, and Gina K Whisper cardstock was perfect. The Whisper is a soft gray, the Fog is even softer, and then you use white with that. So for the most solid layer, I'm using the Whisper, that's the die you see here, and cutting that from the darkest color, that gray. The next layer I'll do from Fog, and then the top two layers I'll do from white cardstock. I am using a Craft a Flower die set from Altenew that has very easy layering pieces to create a very detailed rose. So those first two are the grays. Now this one here is white, and then the final little layering details will be white too. So by using the soft gray paper for the bottom layers, you're going to really show the layering a bit more because that bit of darker color is underneath there. Another thing you could do is start with all white cardstock, and on the bottom two layers, apply a very light amount of light gray ink. So that's another option too. But look how beautiful this layered flower is. I think it's fun to create white flowers because you can leave the color in the background where you really want your focus, and this just adds some more texture but isn't too distracting. And by the way, the Altenew die sets come with a layering guide, so it's really easy to follow along and figure out how these line up. So there you can see the beautiful white layered rose. Now to go with that, I am using a thank you sentiment. This is the Altenew Thank You for Being My Friend die. There's a shadow die and the word dies. I'm die cutting that, but cutting off the words thank you. So this is again a way to stretch your supplies and change the sentiments. So I cut the words thank you from black cardstock and the shadow for those words from white cardstock, and I'm gluing those together and we'll add them on top of our rose. I also created just solid dark green leaves using the layering dies in the rose set. So I glued all of that together onto a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch top folding white note card. You can see how the thank you is stretched across the rose, but I can still see all the texture of the rose, and that background shows plenty in the background. I also added some white pearls just for a little bit of interest. So I really hope you'll give this idea of inking an embossing folder background and sanding off the raised areas a try. It really can be impactful and give you more looks for your embossing folders. I will link at the end here to that other video I mentioned where I demonstrated more ideas of these techniques. If you're interested in the things that I used today, they will be linked below in my YouTube description, but you can also go to my blog where there is a lot more information, including supplies and photos. I appreciate you spending this time with me. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon with another video.